XR 会議2022にご参加いただきありがとうございます。 XR 会議2022はプラチナスポンサーパナソニック株式会社、株式会社シフトール、シンク&センス、株式会社ナイアンティック、日本マイクロソフト株式会社、ソニー株式会社ほかスポンサー各社の協賛で開催いたします。セッション開始まで今しばらくお待ちください。まもなく次のセッションが始まります。コメントは配信画面右のコメント欄からお寄せください。またスクリーンショットや SNS への投稿に関してはサイト上部の記載をご確認ください。お時間となりましたのでセッションを始めます。コメントは配信画面右のコメント欄からお寄せください。またスクリーンショットや SNS への投稿に関してはサイト上部の記載をご確認ください。それではどうぞ。
Hi everyone, this is from Pradeep wishing you all a very happy good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, whatever it is in your part of the world. I know in Sydney it is a lovely day. By way of introduction, my name is Pradeep Khanna, and I have a number of global roles in the Metaverse ecosystem. I am the Executive Director Asia Pacific for the world's largest VR/AR focused association in the world. I am also on the advisory board of Global Metaverse Fashion Council, CEO of a company called Global Mindset, and co-founder of an initiative called InSquare. And there are a couple of other roles. I'm delighted to be talking to you today on the Evolving Metaverse. And for this, I want you to go back to October 2021. Why October 2021? Because that was the month when Facebook rebranded themselves as Meta. And all of a sudden, everybody wanted to know what a metaverse is. Well, it is now more than 12 months, and let's look at what is happening to the metaverse in November 2022. I want you to have a look at the venture capital funding into the metaverse ecosystem from 2017 to 2022. There is a clear trend, as the graph in the slide shows, that the funding has reduced to almost half over the 5 years. No doubt that these funding levels are biased if there are, and they can be vitiated if there is lumpiness in the funding, but the trend is pretty obvious. Even if you were to go back to October or the last quarter of 2021, when Facebook rebranded themselves, and compare that with the succeeding 4 quarters, we find that the VC funding peaked at $2.1 billion in Q4 2021, the quarter that Facebook rebranded themselves, to a current level of $760 million in the 3rd quarter of 2022. Let's look at another trend. The main driver for reigniting the interest in Metaverse. That is Facebook. What is Facebook's stock price and market capitalization over the recent 12 months? But in October 2021, Facebook's price was at $326 US, resulting in a market capitalization of almost about $1 trillion US. And where are we now? Well, Facebook's stock price as on 31st October 2022 was $93 US, resulting in a market capitalization of less than 1/3 of the peak, and now down to less than $300 billion US. So it's been fun time for Facebook as well. Along with the VC funding, Facebook's stock price, let's have a look at what is happening in the crypto market. We all know the shocks that we have all witnessed in the crypto market in 2022, and the recent one with the filing for bankruptcy by FTX. Crypto market, once again, from the last quarter of 2021, at a peak of $3 trillion, is now less than 1/3 and around 800 billion US. And crypto, along with NFTs, is an important component insofar as the metaverse is concerned. So we saw the declining VC funding, we saw the declining Meta's stock price, we saw the declining crypto market capitalization over the last 12 months. But let's have a look at some other perspectives as well. As this slide shows, everybody in this world wants to do something in the metaverse. While there are a number of ways to slice and dice the metaverse ecosystem and the value chain, but the sheer number of entities is very, very large and continues to rise. And let's have a look at how investments are happening in the metaverse from a sector perspective. There is, once again, no doubt that big tech is leading the investment and accounts for almost about 17% of the total investment in the metaverse ecosystem. But there is no surprise that, just like in the case of VR, AR, In the metaverse ecosystem, also, education and training account for 12% and are the second highest industry sector. Then followed by finance and marketing and advertisements, both which have 11% and 10% investments in this ecosystem. The complete list of industries having more than 5% is given in this slide, but it's a growing indication of what is happening in this ecosystem. And when we look at country states, we've got an island nation by the name of Tuvalu. It's an island which is in South Pacific Ocean. It's the fourth largest country in the world with a population of 10,400. It has announced plans in November 2022 at COP27 to recreate itself in the metaverse. Tuvalu's existence itself is coming into question because of climate change and sustainability with rising temperatures. And therefore, it was interesting to note Tuvalu announcing that it plans to recreate itself in the metaverse at COP27. Now, when we look at, while there are a number of major platforms which are emerging in metaverse, some of the major ones are highlighted on this slide. And 3 platforms which are having users in excess of 200,000 are Horizon, Sandbox, and Roblox. These are monthly active users. Of course, in the case of Sandbox and Roblox, the number is very, very encouraging. But in the case of Horizon, the number is actually discouraging. Why? Because Horizons is the metaverse of Meta, also known as Facebook, which has more than 3 billion users all over the world. So it shows that there is user adoption happening, but the user adoption by the biggest platform still has a way to go. Another perspective, there are various forecasts by McKinsey's, by Gartner, and by a number of other consulting companies in terms of how much time will we be spending in the metaverse in 5 years from now. And it is no surprise when we look at this particular slide. As per McKinsey, we will be spending on average around 4 hours per day in the metaverse. And these hours will vary depending on the demographics. And without doubt, Gen Z will be the one which will be spending the highest amount of time in the metaverse, forecast at 4.7 hours. As compared to baby boomers are the people who were born after Second World War. And these people will be spending the least amount of time at 1.8 hours per day, giving an average of 3.7 hours or approximately 4 hours per day. So it is happening. Even though we have seen trends which are indicating what is the current state of play in November 2022, but there is no two ways that the journey towards the metaverse has truly commenced. So on one hand, what we are seeing is the typical emerging technology life cycle playing by itself, but all indications are that as the metaverse emerges in the years ahead to come, it will play a significant, important role in our lives. And the question, I suppose, in everybody's mind is the gold or the diamond rush towards the metaverse, is it very much on? Yes, it is on. Now let's revisit what is the genesis of the metaverse. In the good old days, immersive technologies were known by the names of augmented reality and virtual reality. Then what happened? Well, people looked at the definition of immersive technologies and said that end of the day, this is a combination of the real and the digital world. So let's call them mixed reality, where depending on what time you look at the spectrum from the real world to the virtual world, you'll have different combinations of the two worlds. Then came the question, well, mixed reality, yes, but how does mixed reality differ from augmented reality, and is it creating confusion? Then people said, let's call all of these under the brand of or under the banner of extended realities. So extended reality became the term to represent any kind of augmented virtual reality. And now, over the COVID timeline, we have rediscovered and calling this immersive world as metaverse. Enter the metaverse into our lives. Even though the metaverse has been known since 1992, it has been reinvented during COVID times. But the reality is that at this particular point in time, there is no one agreement as to what is the definition of the metaverse. And you get as many different perspectives depending on the number of people one speaks to. Clearly, it is work in progress. Some of the questions or perspectives are, is the metaverse just the virtual world? Or is it a combination of the real and the virtual world? And the best example of the metaverse has been the movie by Steven Spielberg, which came out in 2018, which was Ready Player Me, which showed people oscillating their time between a real and a virtual world. So the question in terms of definition is that is it that virtual world, or is it the real and the virtual world which is called metaverse? Now, also let's look at what is happening in terms of building metaverses. We note that every major tech company or every major big company of the world is building their own metaverses, as I call them as mini metaverses. Now, what do we call these mini metaverses? Are they a metaverse by themselves? Or is the combination of all the mini metaverses by all the companies a metaverse? And likewise, is it the combination of all these mini metaverses and the real world? Or there is yet something else? And that something else comes down to the basic components of the metaverse as we'll go through later down. But these components are very much based on blockchain 3.0 and Web 3.0, where the question of data decentralization is being identified as the way forward. So how does this decentralized world live with these mini metaverses, and which is going to be the way forward is yet another perspective insofar as the metaverse is concerned. Clearly, it is obvious that the future will involve the decentralized world as well as these mini metaverses, and interoperability and shared protocols will become the key in the evolution of the metaverse. This, along with the accessibility of the metaverse across all devices, are the two key blocks for the evolving metaverse. There are some questions as well. As we know from virtual reality, the issues of isolation and safety come in. Now, these get amplified multifold in the metaverse. Likewise, the issue of data security and privacy. And as we have seen that the metaverse journey is being led by big tech, there needs to be much higher level of community involvement and leadership by the community in this journey. And last but not the least, what we are talking about is a kind of a digital twin which is overlaying the world. Now, how will the national sovereign boundaries play out insofar as the metaverse is concerned? So these are questions which will become important aspects as the metaverse evolves over the next couple of years. But one thing is for sure, that as we even have virtual calls by various technology platforms and sometimes see dropouts, that we do need significantly more computing power for the metaverse to emerge, maybe even quantum computing. We do need tools for immersive experiences, but tools which are very user friendly, which do not involve a lot of technology awareness or knowledge. Along with that, we do need an enhanced graphics, and from a network perspective, potentially 5G, not 5G potentially, but potentially 6G may be required to get a seamless experience of large number of concurrent and persistent users. The ecosystem for the metaverse as it is appearing, it really consists of a basket of emerging technologies. And we will see later down in the presentation what does this basket consist of. But some characteristics of this ecosystem are that 80% of the entities tend to be startups, and 75% of 80% of the entities tend to be bootstrapped, which means they are self-funded. So all in all, it's a very, very interesting ecosystem. And at this particular point in time, there is either too much information or too little information available about these large number of entities, and thereby making it more difficult to understand what are the developments in this ecosystem. I myself know more than 10,000 entities all over the world in this ecosystem. So you can imagine the large number of players which are there. Again, to some indication of what is happening in the Asia Pacific, Australia alone has 1,500 companies. South Korea has more than 1,000 companies. India has more than 3,000 companies. China has more than 4,000 companies. And as I mentioned earlier, I know more than 10,000 entities all over the world. So the large number of entities and a bit of a opaque visibility to these entities makes the ecosystem a bit like the Wild West. So we've had a look at what is the current state of play in November 2022. We've also looked at the definition of the metaverse and understand that this is work in progress. We've also looked at what the ecosystem is like. Now let's have a look at what are the building blocks of the metaverse. As I mentioned earlier, Metaverse is a basket of emerging technologies which include XR, blockchain 3.0, Web 3.0, NFT, cryptos, AI, ML, IoT, 5G, etc., etc. But if you were to look at an infrastructure level, clearly blockchain 3.0, Web 3.0, 5G or IR are at the infrastructure level or at the base level. And at the higher levels, gaming and experience centers or experiences are the building blocks, whereas NFTs and potentially digital currencies and potentially cryptos provide the commercial framework for transactions in the metaverse. Well, we know how Web 1.0 has evolved to Web 2.0, and now the journey is towards Web 3.0, which is the spatial web. One way of looking at the spatial web is a three-layer model where the bottommost layer is the physical layer. The second layer is the digital information layer. The third layer is the one which is the spatial layer where is the interactions happening on a 3D level. Moving on to the next infrastructure building block, which is blockchain 3.0. We know over the years, cryptocurrency and smart-based contracts provided the framework for blockchain 1.0 and blockchain 2.0. Well, blockchain 3.0 takes the journey forward in terms of widespread adoption. But there are still some challenges which are in terms of by way that this technology works. As you can see, that the number of transactions that can be done through blockchain, while they have increased from 5 transactions per second to 257 transactions per second, as Bitcoin 1.0 evolved from Bitcoin 3.0, but it is still a far way from what Visa processes, which is around 1,700 transactions per second. Now, coming on to the third infrastructure building block, which is 5G. This chart shows the number of 5G connections worldwide by different regions from 2021 to 2025. There is no two ways about it that certain countries are way ahead, and these countries are China, Korea, US, and Japan, who are leading in the 5G connections. But it is not just laying 5G, but it is on building up the 5G ecosystem, which is becoming more important. Now, moving on to the drivers for commercial transactions, let's have a look at NFT, where all of us know that NFTs today, the widespread adoption of NFTs having because they become the certificate for authenticity based on blockchain technology. Through NFTs, we are able to establish the authenticity of the asset as well as the authenticity of the ownership. Value is more due to uniqueness and scarcity. NFTs also have been going through some very interesting times where last year in 2021, NFTs was the most searched word in the Cambridge listing. But yes, that has come down slightly looking at all what is happening in the digital world, and especially in the crypto world. NFTs, which started off by or being driven by art, have led to all different categories or many different categories of assets. Over time, we will be owning assets, both real assets as well as digital assets. The proportion of assets that each one of us owns will vary from person to person, but there is no doubt that this journey has also commenced. We also see an increasingly important role by the central bank digital currencies in the evolution of commercial activities in the metaverse. Let's now have a look at gaming. And why is gaming? Because gaming, the earlier adopters, they have been used to operating in a metaverse kind of environment for quite some time. And along with consumers and entertainment leading the adoption of metaverse. It's interesting to note that the world's population, which has touched almost 8 billion recently, out of that 3 billion people are involved in gaming in some form and shape, which means that around 38% of the population of the whole world is involved in gaming in some form and shape. The value of the gaming industry has been estimated at 175 billion US dollars, and is about 8% of the total M&E spend. And this is the key factor, which is a large proportion of gamers who are already used to the metaverse kind of environment are leading the charge insofar as take up of metaverse is concerned. Let's have a look at another aspect, which is meta-humans. In the metaverse, at the moment, we have been talking about that each one of us will have an avatar. And that is how we will engage with each other through our avatars. At the moment, the avatars which are available are more like any other, gaming kind of an avatar. But as time goes by, this will slowly progress to avatars being an reflection of our true facial identities. But there is a way to go in this at the moment. There is another category which is emerging as very important players, and this is through generational artificial intelligence, which is really creating content from text or from any other simple means. One of the ways that this has expressed itself is through digital influencers. And the first one that I want to talk about is the influencer Lil Miquela in the US, which was posted in 2016 and by 2018 already had 1 million followers. By February 2022, the number of followers had increased to 3.1 million. Second is a digital influencer, Rosie, in South Korea. This was launched in July 2021 and within a year had 144,000 followers. It generated sponsorship deals of almost close to $854,000 within this time span. And now let's have a look at the third digital influencer by the name of Kyra. This is in India, which was introduced in January 2022 and by June had 100,000 followers. Now, why are these influencers important? Because these influencers are an expression of meta-humans, which, like avatars, will have an increasing role to play in the metaverse. So we've looked at some perspectives insofar as the metaverse are concerned, but let us also now look at some other interesting questions about the metaverse. And first and foremost is about cybersecurity. See, the fact is that while the metaverse will play an increasingly important role and will generate significant amount of commercial activity, but so are the inherent risks. Cybercrime, as an example, will increase significantly in value with the enhanced digital activity. In 2021, cybercrime was estimated to be around $6 trillion, making it the third biggest economy after the US and China. And this is expected to increase to $10 trillion by 2025. So you can imagine the level of or the seriousness of this particular aspect. In Australia, we had a recent cybersecurity issue or hacking by the second largest telecommunication provider, where almost about 10 million records or records of almost 10 million people were stolen. Now, why does this become important? That the total population of Australia is 25 million, and to that extent, almost about 40% of the population had their data records stolen. And there's no wonder this was a very, very serious issue from data security and privacy. And as I mentioned earlier, this amplifies the cybersecurity risk in the digital world number of times. And there's also, the creation of deep fake, where once your identity is stolen, then you are sometimes transacting with somebody whom you think is the person you are transacting with, but is a deep fake who's been created based on your information. And clearly, this has to be a global initiative in building up collaboration frameworks and standard. And there is still a lot of work to do in this. The other big aspect that we need to look at is in terms of sustainability. And why is that important is purely because what we are doing by transferring activities from the physical world to the digital world, we are transferring the physical value chains to digital value chains. So, what are the implications of that? Just imagine the number of data centers which are needed to support the metaverse. And this has implications across two dimensions. One is along e-waste or electronic waste, and the second is along energy consumption. So if you were to look at a typical device, a digital device, this is the value chain that the device goes through. There is first at a component stage where different components are assembled and there are emissions along at that particular stage. Then at a product stage, there are emissions, and even when the product is transferred, let's say a mobile phone is assembled at a plant, so you have emissions at component level, at a finished product level, and then the finished product is transferred or transported, and there are emissions. There are emissions while using it. There are emissions while the end of the life, dispersal is happening for that particular digital object. So you can see that this can be, both the embedded and operational impact from a sustainability perspective. So we've looked at one example, which is from an electronic waste perspective. Now let's have a look at the second, which is in terms of energy forecast or energy usage. As this particular slide shows that how, from the current state to 2030, is the energy usage increasing very radically because of ICT and data centers. And this does not even take into account the discussion about metaverses. So you can see the tremendous amount of energy which is going to be used in supporting ICT, which is being used for the metaverse. And also to give a comparative perspective in terms of cryptos or digital currencies. The energy consumed by Bitcoin is actually more than energy consumed by certain countries like Norway and Bangladesh, Switzerland, as the slide shows. Now, the question comes in is that how best do we manage this energy consumption? One is, of course, by moving to more sustainable sources or green energy sources, but we can't expect that the whole world's consumption will move across to green. We know even what is happening at COP27 discussions. So there is a fair degree of way to go in this sustainability discussion. We gave that example of Bitcoin, and I know that in September, Ethereum introduced the merge update. What they did was they went from proof of work to proof of stake methodology for validation in the blockchain and reduced the energy consumed by the network almost by 99.95%. But so is this the Eureka movement insofar as use of digital assets? Well, let's see, because even insofar as Ethereum is concerned, there are a number of challenges. One is that there is an existing level of infrastructure within the Ethereum blockchain, which is already committed to proof of work. So we are seeing a fork emerge in the Ethereum blockchain. Number two is that there have been scalability issues insofar as Ethereum is concerned. And I'm not even referring to the recent challenges that we have seen due to the collapse of FTX, but this is in general what are the challenges in terms of sustainability by using cryptos and digital currencies. Let me also remind everybody that when we talk about sustainability, we have only looked at the climate aspect of it. But sustainability is a much wider topic and covers the 18 Sustainable Development Goals as defined by UN. I'm now heading towards the close and I want to leave two thoughts with you. One is that the role of telecom companies in terms of the metaverse. Telecom companies are at one level laying 5G and will be the drivers for 6G. But there is another very, very important aspect of the telecom companies. They are also the last mile connectors to the user base of consumers and businesses. In doing so, they will be the ones which will look at offering metaverse to the last mile and may do some heavy lifting in terms of metaverse adoption. So we see telecom companies as important players apart from other big tech companies in the metaverse journey. Second thought is that a lot of discussions have happened or are happening purely on immersive experiences which are based on vision and audio, which means that we have talked about visual immersive experiences and audio immersive experiences. But we've got three other senses, which is touch, taste, and smell. And there is work happening in all of these areas for immersive experiences. And really, it will come down to multi-sensory immersive experience in the metaverse, which will really be the holy grail. Now, that's the end of my presentation, and I enjoyed presenting to you, and I look forward to talking to you once again sometime in future, and happy to take any questions which you could either send through to me later down, and my contact details are given over here, and you can make a note of this contact details in case you have any queries. Feel free to reach out to me, as well as I will say that I enjoy your morning cup of tea, your afternoon lunch, or an evening glass of wine, whatever it is which works best for you. Take care. This is Pradeep from Sydney signing off.
本セッションは終了となります。セッションの聴講ありがとうございました。次のセッションページへとご移動いただき、引き続き XR 会議をお楽しみください。